Today I'm going to show you how to make sourdough bread using only 3 ingredients: flour, water and salt. I'm Fiona, welcome to Fiona's Food for Life. So to make sourdough bread I use 3 ingredients: flour, water and salt. At my fermentation demo you get a jar of Sourdough Starter. It should smell quite yeasty. And if it smells like acetone, like say a nail varnish remover, then it's probably gone. But what you do first of all, you can see there's lots of bubbles in it, so that's how you know that it's actually alive. You stir it up. It will decrease in size, but that's fine. And we're going to make our Levain stage. We're going to put about half of this, about 75 grams of your sourdough starter, into a bowl with flour, 200 grams of flour. I use a little bit of rye flour and some strong white organic flour. And we're going to mix that together with 200 mils of water. So I use a spring water. You stir it all together. When this is all the right consistency, you put it aside in a warm, dark place. Then for a minimum of 4 hours, but you could leave it up to 2 to 3 days before you go on to the next stage of making your bread. We have it all stirred up like this, and then we will pop the cover on it, and we're going to pop that into a warm, dark place, as I say, for a minimum of 4 hours. What you do then with the leftover starter is you need to feed it so you can keep on using it. We're going to put approximately 2 tablespoons. I like to use rye flour in this. Rye flour, it's a really nice flour. It can make quite a dense bread. So when I make the actual bread, I use a strong white flour, often mixed with a malthouse flour. But for the starter, I tend to use full rye. And then we put in approximately 2 tablespoons of water. And we're going to stir it up. This is called feeding your starter. And when you get it to this nice sloppy consistency, that's what you're looking for. You can pop the lid back on. You can leave it on the counter for an hour or two just to make sure it's active and you see little air bubbles on the side, or you just pop it into the fridge. It'll stay for a week without you having to feed it each day. So that's your sourdough starter and your Levain. So now we're on to the second stage of the sourdough. Here's our Levain that we made earlier. It's been sitting for about 4 or 5 hours. You can see it's risen up here and you can see lots of different air bubbles in underneath. So this is our Levain ready to work into our bread stage. So for our bread stage, we need 750 grams of flour. You'd use organic and some of it needs to be a strong flour. So it's handy, you can use a mixture of different flours. So I'm using a strong white flour, a malthouse flour and a rye flour to make up my 750 grams of flour. Then I'm going to add into it 15 grams of salt. You do need the salt in this, it helps it rise and it also gives it flavour. Okay, and then we're going to add in the Levain. So with sourdough, you tend to use half the mixture a lot of the time. So when I was making the Levain, I took half the mixture out of the jar. Now with this Levain, I'm going to use only half of it. I often use the analogy of puppies, a litter of puppies with their mum. If they're in one corner of the room, they're perfectly happy. But if you split up that litter into 2 different parts, they are both going to be on high alert, yelping and screeching and making lots and lots of noise. We want that with our sourdough. We want this starter to be alive and have energy and be ready to go. That's why we're only going to add in half of the Levain. So it's 175 grams of the Levain. Pop it on my scales here. There we go. So, perfect. Now what we have left with that Levain is approximately 1 cup. I hate wasting things, so that 1 cup is what I use to make either sourdough crackers or sourdough pizza base. So now we're going to mix the whole lot together with 500 mils of tepid water. So I use a little bit of boiling water, and the rest of the water then is the spring water. And we're going to mix it together in a nice dough. This is a no-knead method that I use. So it's really a simplified method because you don't have to feed the starter every day and you don't have to knead it now. So don't put it in your food processor or your mixer with the dough hook. You just mix it all together here. We can put a bit of flour on our board. Now we're just going to mix all of that together. It's really handy using a dough hook like this. You want the dough to be nice and soft, but you also need to be able to handle it. So what I tend to do is use the dough hook in one hand, or the dough scraper, and just use the other hand touching the dough until it's the right consistency. So it's not like a traditional yeast bread where you want to stretch it all out. We're just really getting it into a nice smooth dough. Okay, so once it's in its nice smooth dough, you can do one of two things. You can either leave it to stand for about an hour on the countertop like that, or you can just continue to work straight away, which is what I tend to do these days. So I'm dividing it into about 3/4 and 1/4. So I'm going to put 1/4 into this. This is called a banneton, and it's made out of bamboo, and it's what puts the lovely lines on the outside of the sourdough bread. So all we want to do is to get our small piece nice and smooth on one side. Once you've got the nice smooth side, give it another little go. You're going to pop it smooth side down into the banneton. That's going to rise in that banneton, and then we will turn it out to cook. Now, one of the problems that can happen when you have a beautiful soft sourdough like this is that you go to all the work, you leave it to rise, and then when you turn it out, it just flops. So to prevent that and to make it easier for slicing, for toast, etc., I tend to put about 3/4 of it into this type of container. So we've got a tin like this. The one compromise that you will make with this is that you won't get as much of a crust. This one will have a much nicer crust. It'll go into a hot tray in a hot oven, whereas this cold tin will go into the hot oven and it'll take a while to heat up. So that's the one compromise, but it prevents sunken bread, which can be very disappointing. So I'll just put a little bit of oil into the base of it just so that it doesn't stick. Then I'm going to put this in. Now we've got the smooth side and we've got the rough side. Because I won't be turning this out to bake, I will be baking it upright. So we're going to put it into the tin this way. Okay, so we have our dough with the smooth side up in this tin to rise, the smooth side down in this one because I won't bake it, I'll be turning it out. And you cover both of those. Cling wrap is best. I find a damp tea towel, it can dry out at the edges. And you will leave them for, it depends how warm your home is. So I would usually leave it about 6 to 8 hours, but during the winter I could leave it overnight. And then it's ready to bake. To finish it off and get it into the oven, first of all, preheat your oven to 240 degrees. If it's in a tin like this, we're just going to score it. But if it's in a banneton like this or even a bowl, we need to turn it out. To show you how to do both, to score it, a nice sharp blade works really well. Make cuts without hesitating into it. That's so that when it rises, it's got its path of least resistance. If you don't score it, the bread will kind of crack. Then to turn this one out, you need to ease it out of the tin slowly. I often use a knife to help it out. There we go. And then we're going to cut through this again. It will start to drop a little bit, but you need to work quickly to get it into the oven. So now, we've a preheated tray in the oven. We're going to lift it up on this mat, pop it in, put our loaf in beside it, and to help with the crust, we're going to spray some water in. So for the first 15 minutes, you can have a bit of steam or water in the oven. So we set the timer for 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, turn the oven down to 200 degrees. Don't open the oven, and set the timer then for another 15 minutes for the small loaf and 20 minutes for the larger one. So now the loaves have been in for 30 minutes. The small one's ready. You can see a beautiful loaf like that. Turn it over. You can hear it's nice and hollow and it has a lovely crust. But the other one, I'm just going to turn it out of the tin and pop it back in for a couple of minutes, just so we can get more of a crust there. Five minutes later, the larger loaf should be ready. Won't be as crispy because it was cooked in the tin, but you can still hear that it's hollow. And there you have sourdough with 3 ingredients. I find if you let it cool a little bit, the sourdough is lovely, sliced nice and thin, and then I would freeze them and take them out for toast anytime you need it. So you can see there's lots of nice air in that bread there. I hope you enjoyed today's video on sourdough bread. Don't forget to subscribe below, like and leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Why not check out my other videos about how to see if an avocado is ripe, or a recipe like making dal. Thanks a million, see you soon.